For months, the sky had been quiet. The telescopes kept their gaze fixed on a small, cold traveler moving through the darkness, an interstellar object called 3I Atlas. It wasn't supposed to be special, just another visitor from beyond, crossing paths with our solar system before vanishing again into the endless black. Astronomers tracked it with calm precision. Coordinates, velocities, trajectories. Everything looked normal, predictable, but then the waiting sky began to change. At first, it was a whisper, a faint curve in the light, a detail so small it could have been ignored. But the data didn't lie. The reflection coming off 3 Atlas wasn't consistent. It was bending, fluctuating, bending again, like a flickering heartbeat buried in numbers. That shouldn't happen. Not out there, not in the vacuum of space. Across observatories, scientists began to notice the same thing. The light curve, the measurement of brightness as the object turned, didn't behave like a rock or ice or anything we've seen. It was as if something near it was changing the way light bounced back to us, something invisible, something close. For years, we've looked at the stars believing they hold quiet truths, that physics, math, and gravity will always explain what we see. But sometimes the universe hesitates. Sometimes it shows you something that doesn't belong. In Chile, one observatory recorded a subtle dip every 19 hours. In Hawaii, another telescope confirmed it. And in Japan, a team double-checked the data. Every time the object rotated, there was a small pulse in brightness, then silence. Then again, almost like a rhythm, almost like a signal. The scientific community did what it always does. It searched for reason. Maybe the object's surface was jagged. Maybe it had reflective crystals or rotating debris. Maybe it was a glitch. But as weeks passed, the theory fell apart. Because the pulse wasn't random. It was perfectly timed. Every 19 hours, on the second, the same fluctuation appeared. No matter which telescope watched it, nature doesn't keep time like that. By mid-March, the data became impossible to ignore. The light curve had formed a pattern, not chaotic, but ordered. It would rise, hold steady, and then drop in exact symmetry. Something was controlling how that light reached us, but if not the object itself, then what? 3I Atlas continued its slow drift toward the inner solar system, and with each passing week, the anomaly grew stronger. The brightness shifted, almost as if the object were adjusting its angle, reacting to observation. Some astronomers laughed it off as coincidence. Others stayed silent. But deep down, there was a tension, a quiet understanding that maybe this wasn't natural. Maybe we weren't just watching it. Maybe it was watching us. Space has a strange way of making us feel safe. It looks still, predictable. We think we know it. But behind that stillness, there are movements we can't explain, forces we don't yet understand. And sometimes, those forces move with purpose. At NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab, one analyst described it best. It's like something is interfering with the reflection. Like there's a veil between the object and our eyes. A veil. That word lingered. What kind of veil could hide in empty space? The team compared infrared data, optical readings, and even background microwave emissions. Everything pointed to the same impossible truth. There was a faint distortion surrounding 3I Atlas, like a halo of energy bending the light around it. Not dust, not ice, not anything natural. And yet, it was there. Imagine staring at the stars your entire life, trusting that every photon reaching your eye has traveled billions of years to get there. Now imagine realizing that something out there is modifying that light before it ever arrives. That's what the astronomers saw, and none of them could explain it. Then came the silence. For 3 nights in a row, 3I Atlas dimmed completely. Telescopes lost it. The coordinates still matched, but the light, the reflection that had been pulsing for weeks, when it reappeared, the curve had changed again. Sharper, stronger, almost as if it had noticed our confusion. By now, the data was spreading fast through private astronomy circles, forums, encrypted servers. The public didn't know. Not yet. But inside these quiet digital rooms, the talk was growing darker. One word kept surfacing again and again. Artificial. The thought seemed absurd. A man-made object out there, following 3I Atlas? Why? How? But every explanation failed to match the evidence. The precision of the light curve, the synchronized rhythm, the cooling and heating pattern that shouldn't even exist in deep space. It all pointed to something aware. Night after night, they watched, and night after night, the pattern repeated. The waiting sky had turned into a mirror, showing us something we weren't ready to see. 3I Atlas was no longer just an interstellar visitor. It was a message wrapped in motion, a silence that spoke louder than any sound. And somewhere behind that silence, something else was following. When the first official report reached the International Astronomical Union, it ended with a single line. A warning, written by one of the lead analysts. There is a secondary source of reflection that cannot be explained by any known object or process. Recommend continuous monitoring. Continuous monitoring. That's the scientific way of saying, don't look away. In the following weeks, data would pour in faster than anyone could analyze it. New light variations, thermal distortions, anomalies that made less and less sense the deeper you looked. The kind of patterns that whispered of intention, of design. But that's what made it so terrifying. Because if something was controlling the light, if something was shaping what we saw, then maybe this object wasn't traveling alone. Maybe 3I Atlas wasn't just passing through. Maybe it was being escorted, and somewhere beyond the reach of our telescopes, beyond the waiting sky, something else was moving with it, silent, hidden, watching, waiting for us to notice. It started as a flicker, so faint that most telescopes ignored it. A pulse, hiding inside the light curve of 3I Atlas. Every 19 hours, a rise, a fall, a perfect beat, repeating with mechanical precision. At first, it looked like noise, the kind of data you delete without thinking. But one observatory in Chile didn't. They watched it. And when the same pattern appeared again, they realized it wasn't a mistake. Something was repeating. Something deliberate. For weeks, scientists tried to explain it away. Maybe it was a rotational quirk. Maybe sunlight was bouncing off jagged ice. Maybe it was just our instruments playing tricks. But deep down, they knew. Nature doesn't pulse like a clock. Soon, more observatories joined in. Hawaii, Japan, France. Each one capturing the same strange rhythm, light surging and dimming in perfect synchronization, a global pattern. synchronized to the second. That's when they stopped calling it an anomaly. They started calling it a signal. Imagine the feeling. You're staring at data that shouldn't exist. Your equipment works perfectly. And yet, something out there, millions of kilometers away, is blinking back at you. Every scientist who saw the numbers felt the same chill, the same question whispered through the labs and conference calls. What if it's intentional? No one said alien, not out loud, but they didn't have to. You could hear it in the pauses between their words. Something, or someone, was controlling how that light behaved. The strange thing was, the pulse wasn't strong. It was subtle, almost shy, like a whisper under cosmic static. But it carried structure, too consistent, too precise to be a coincidence. Every 19 hours, the brightness rose sharply, held steady for 22 minutes, then fell back into darkness, again and again. Across continents, observatories compared their timestamps. The peaks aligned perfectly. There was no delay, no drift, no error. Whatever was creating that pulse, it was keeping time better than any clock on Earth. In Tokyo, a small team of astronomers plotted the signal across a 30-day window. What they found made their hands tremble. Each burst of light wasn't random. It matched a mathematical sequence called the Fibonacci ratio, the same pattern seen in galaxies, hurricanes, even seashells. But this wasn't nature creating beauty. This was something building it. Line by line, pulse by pulse. At NASA's Deep Space Network, they cross-checked the signal using radio wavelengths. There was no sound, no brightness, drifted closer to the inner solar system. The pulses grew slightly stronger, not brighter, just sharper, more. The object wasn't just spinning, it was communicating through its own reflection. But here's what truly unsettled the experts. The timing of the pulse began to shift, by microseconds, as if adapting to the instruments watching it. Every time humanity looked closer, it adjusted, almost like it knew. A private research facility in Switzerland ran the numbers through advanced pattern recognition algorithms. The result: the pulses were encoding information, binary sequences hidden in the rhythm of light, ones, zeros. A slow, deliberate conversation written across the stars. When they plotted the first 1,000 intervals, the sequence resembled a geometric pattern, 12 concentric arcs spiraling outward. It looked like an eye. That night, an internal report circulated quietly through the global astronomy network. It carried a single, chilling sentence. The signal exhibits traits of design. Design. That word split the community in half. Some refused to believe it. Others couldn't look away. Because if it was designed, it meant intent. And intent means intelligence. Meanwhile, the public still had no idea. To them, 3i Atlas was just another comet, passing quietly through the solar system. But behind closed doors, the truth was beginning to form a shape, something cold, distant, and aware. A few days later, a university team in Spain tried to replicate the light pattern using a laser array. They failed. Even the most precise instruments couldn't recreate the same 1-9-hour rhythm with that level of accuracy. Whatever was out there had technology beyond comprehension. Or something deeper, a purpose we couldn't yet see. As the weeks went on, the anomaly became impossible to hide. Data leaks appeared online, blurry graphs, screenshots, whispers in astronomy forums. Some said it was a reflection from an unknown companion object. Others claimed it was a transmission, a cosmic heartbeat echoing across space. But one theory spread quietly through those who knew the data best. What if the pulse wasn't coming from 3i Atlas at all? What if it was being sent to it? That idea changed everything. If the light was being modulated by something behind the object, something following it, then we weren't witnessing a signal from space. We were watching communication within space, two entities speaking across the dark. Late one night, at a mountaintop observatory in Hawaii, an astronomer named Mara Solis noticed something strange. Right before each 19-hour pulse, there was a faint precursor flash, just a fraction of a second earlier. When she aligned the timings with the sun's position, the flash always occurred on the opposite side, as if something behind 3i Atlas was triggering it, a shadow hidden in the dark. By now, every major observatory was watching. Hundreds of telescopes, thousands of eyes, each waiting for the next pulse. And when it came, on the 76th cycle, something new happened. For the first time, the pulse didn't end with a fade. It ended with a double flash. Two sharp bursts, perfectly aligned. It was as if the signal was changing its language, evolving. The scientists called it Echo 76, but no one knew what it meant. Behind the data, behind the graphs and numbers, something deeper began to take shape, a feeling. That whatever this was, it wasn't random, it wasn't chaotic, it was patient, and it was watching us back. The world still didn't know. The public still slept under the same stars, unaware that one of them had started to blink, slowly, deliberately, as if the universe itself was trying to make contact. But among those who did know, a question began to grow louder. What if 3 Atlas isn't the source? What if it's the messenger? Because somewhere, behind that pulsing light, beyond the edges of our understanding, something may be sending signals through silence. And it's only a matter of time before it decides to send more. For weeks they thought 3i Atlas was alone, drifting through the void, cold and silent, a visitor from another star. But then something appeared behind it, a shadow, faint, elusive, almost invisible against the black canvas of space. It wasn't seen by optical telescopes. It didn't shine or reflect. It glowed faintly in infrared, like heat where there should be none. At first, no one noticed. The readings came buried deep within data collected by NASA's infrared array in California. Just a small anomaly, a thin, warm streak trailing behind 3i Atlas, like a ghost. The kind of thing you dismiss as static, but when researchers compared multiple scans, the streak wasn't static. It was moving, and not just moving, matching every shift, every turn, every slow rotation of 3i Atlas itself. Whatever this thing was, it was following. In the quiet of the control room, one scientist whispered what everyone else was too afraid to say. It's not debris, because debris doesn't change course. Dust doesn't adjust speed. But this shadow, it kept perfect distance, never closer, never farther, trailing the object like a reflection that refused to disappear. Soon, every infrared telescope on Earth turned towards the coordinates, and as the images came in, the silence in those observatories deepened. The companion, as they began to call it, wasn't random. It had intent. From Japan's Subaru telescope to Chile's ALMA array, the same thing appeared. A faint thermal body, elongated and symmetrical, maintaining exact velocity relative to 3i Atlas. When the object slowed, the shadow slowed. When it spun, the shadow shifted position. It was as if the two were bound together by invisible strings. But here's the strangest part. It wasn't gravitational. Calculations showed that if the shadow had any measurable mass, it should have drifted away, but it didn't. It stayed locked in formation, perfectly stable, as if obeying something else, something intelligent. News of the companion shadow spread quietly across the scientific community. Emails marked confidential, private video calls between observatories. No one dared to speak publicly yet, not until they understood what they were seeing. But behind closed doors, theories began to spiral. One claimed it was a magnetic tether, a natural plasma tail charged by solar wind. Another suggested a piece of alien debris, still active, maybe even self-correcting. But none of it explained the synchronization. None of it explained why the thermal readings pulsed in harmony with the light curve of 3I Atlas. Like two instruments, playing the same rhythm. When the data reached the European Space Agency, they tried a new approach. Instead of tracking light or heat, they mapped the object's orbital path using deep space radar. What they found stopped every conversation in the room. 3I Atlas wasn't drifting on a perfectly smooth path. Every few days it made subtle adjustments, micro-thrusts small enough to go unnoticed in visible light, tiny course corrections, and each time it shifted, the companion shifted too. Not reacting, but anticipating, as if one was guiding the other. By late April, the evidence was undeniable. Two distinct bodies, one visible, one hidden, moving in perfect coordination. A pair, bound by something beyond gravity. And in the quiet hours of early morning, a name began to take hold among those studying it. The binary phantom, because whatever was following 3I Atlas didn't just follow. It moved like a ghost tethered to its twin. The next discovery came from the James Webb Space Telescope. Its sensors caught something no one had expected. Faint emissions of heat bursts from the companion. Every few hours, it would release tiny flashes of infrared radiation, too controlled to be random. Each burst aligned precisely with 3I Atlas's rotation period. The implication was impossible to ignore. Something was powering it, not a rock, not a comet, but a machine. Across the scientific world, the question hung heavy. How could a shadow act with intention? How could something invisible adjust itself in sync with an object crossing millions of kilometers of vacuum? And more importantly, why? To the public, 3I Atlas was still a quiet visitor, a harmless traveler lost among the stars. But in secret reports, a darker picture was forming. If 3I Atlas was merely passing through, then the companion was observing. It didn't lead. It didn't lag too far behind. It just stayed, constant, watching, measuring, like a silent observer riding on the edge of another world's creation. One data analyst at the Jet Propulsion Lab made a haunting observation. The companion behaves like a drone, not a body. A drone without light, without sound, a vessel of unknown origin, following its target through interstellar space. As days turned into weeks, patterns began to emerge. Whenever the pulse from Chapter 2, that strange light modulation, strengthened, the companion's heat signature flickered in response. It was like the two were talking. Call and answer. Light and heat, message and echo. No human language, no digital code, just silence, wrapped in synchronization. Theorists began to wonder, could this be part of a system? A network of travelers, interstellar probes designed not to communicate with us, but with each other? If so, then maybe we were never meant to see it. Maybe we were just in the way. Then, on May 11th, a new anomaly appeared. The companion suddenly shifted 5 degrees off its trajectory. For the first time since discovery, it broke formation. The shift was small, almost unnoticeable, but in cosmic terms, it was massive. It meant something had changed. The data showed a faint thermal bloom, like an ignition. Then, nothing. The companion went dark, completely. For 72 hours, it vanished. Infrared readings flatlined. Every telescope lost track, until suddenly it reappeared. Not behind 3I Atlas this time, beside it. A new position, a new distance. Still synchronized, but different. It was as if the companion had adjusted its orbit to face us. That realization sent a shiver through everyone watching. The data analysts, the scientists, the engineers. Because for the first time, it wasn't just following the comet. It had turned its attention toward Earth. In the days that followed, the object stabilized again. Its temperature evened out. Its pulse matched that of 3I Atlas once more. But the feeling among the team had changed. They weren't observing a phenomenon anymore. They were being observed. When one astronomer was asked how he felt seeing the data, he paused for a long time before answering. It's like something is watching from the dark, waiting for us to understand that it's not alone. The companion remains an enigma. No one knows what it is or what it wants. But one thing is clear: it moves with intention, and it moves in silence. A shadow that breaks every rule we know about the universe. A mirror that follows a traveler from another star. And somewhere in that darkness, beyond every telescope and every explanation, it's waiting for the next move. When something drifts closer to the sun, it's supposed to burn. That's a rule of nature, one we've trusted for centuries. The nearer an object gets to that fireball of plasma, the more it glows, the more it cracks, the more it dies. But 3I Atlas didn't burn. It did the opposite. It froze. At first, no one believed the data. Infrared telescopes across the globe began registering a sharp drop in temperature. Not a small fluctuation, a collapse. In the span of just a few days, the object's surface temperature fell by nearly 50 degrees, closer to the sun, yet colder than before. It made no sense. Every known law of thermal radiation said the same thing. The closer you get to a star, the hotter you become. But 3I Atlas was breaking those laws. Quietly, intentionally. The scientists triple-checked the instruments. They recalibrated the sensors. They reran the algorithms. Every result came back the same. The object was cooling itself down, almost like it knew what was coming. Soon, the news reached every major observatory on Earth. From Pasadena to Paris, people stared at the graphs in silence. That same downward curve of temperature repeating across independent datasets. No solar glare could explain it. No dust cloud. No natural phenomenon. Something was regulating the heat, like a body protecting its core. Like a machine. You could almost feel the disbelief ripple through the scientific community, because this wasn't how comets behaved. This wasn't how anything behaved. 3I Atlas wasn't absorbing sunlight, it was rejecting it, reflecting energy back into space, as if its surface was made of something more advanced than ice, metal, or rock. Something intelligent. The James Webb Space Telescope caught the clearest image yet, a faint halo around the object, barely visible in infrared. It shimmered like an invisible shell. When light hit it, the temperature inside dropped even further. That meant one thing. This halo wasn't just reflecting energy. It was blocking it. An energy shield, or something that functioned like one. A quiet panic began to grow in the labs. Not fear of danger, fear of understanding. Because this wasn't just a discovery. This was an intrusion, something foreign to physics itself. And for the first time, some scientists began to whisper the impossible. It's protecting itself. Imagine standing before that data, realizing that what you're seeing isn't just matter reacting to sunlight, but matter defending against it, like a living thing flinching at pain. Except this wasn't alive, not in any way we understand. By mid-May, the object reached perihelion, its closest point to the sun, and that's when the numbers went beyond impossible. At a distance where it should have reached over 800 degrees Kelvin, it dropped below 200, an icy core orbiting near fire. It wasn't melting, it wasn't vaporizing, it was shielding. The more scientists tried to analyze it, the stranger it became. Thermal readings showed the cooling effect started before the increase in sunlight, as though it was predicting the heat, like it knew when to protect itself. And then, something even stranger happened. The cooling pattern wasn't random. It pulsed in waves. Every 3 hours, temperature data would rise and fall like a heartbeat. Back on Earth, people in small, private research circles started to notice something eerie. The same timing, that 3-hour interval, matched the rhythm of the earlier light pulses seen in Chapter 2. It was as if both signals were connected, as if the cooling process wasn't natural at all, but controlled. Theories began to spiral. Some said it was a magnetic reaction. Others said it was some kind of molecular phase change, an unknown alloy adjusting its surface to survive solar radiation. But one theory spread quietly among those who dared to think beyond science. What if it's a vessel, not a rock, not a comet, but a machine traveling through space, one built to endure the death of stars? Because what kind of intelligence designs something that can approach the sun and stay cold? Not one that fears heat, one that understands it, one that uses it. Infrared imaging revealed a pattern, faint, symmetrical lines across the object's surface. They looked like fractures at first, but under analysis, they formed a lattice, geometric, precise, too deliberate to be random. One scientist from the European Space Agency described it best. It looks like ventilation, like the surface breathes. Cooling vents, microscopic channels releasing bursts of vaporized gas, controlling temperature through active regulation. That's not geology. That's engineering. In the following days, as 3 Atlas drifted away from the sun, its temperature began to rise again. Slowly, naturally, like it was relaxing. The system, whatever it was, had done its job. It had survived the heat. It had protected the core. And in that moment, everything changed. Because this wasn't just a rock passing through our solar system anymore. It was something designed to survive it. For some, this discovery was exhilarating. Proof that somewhere out there, an intelligence far beyond us had created something capable of navigating stars. But for others, it was unsettling. If it could protect itself from the sun, what else could it protect itself from? What else could it resist? The question no one wanted to say out loud began to grow heavier. If it's a machine, who built it? The most chilling detail came later, from a team of astrophysicists in Sweden who analyzed the cooling signature more closely. They found that the pattern of thermal regulation wasn't just functional, it was coded. Each cooling cycle followed a fractal structure, a recursive mathematical design used in computer science for self-regulating algorithms. That meant this object wasn't just reacting to heat, it was calculating it. Every degree, every fluctuation, every photon of light measured and responded to. No human technology could survive that environment. Not even our most advanced spacecraft could endure such radiation. But this thing was thriving in it, alive, in its own mechanical way. When asked to describe what they were seeing, one researcher said softly, "It's not a comet, it's a survivor." As 3I Atlas began its slow journey back toward the outer solar system, the data feeds grew quieter. The cooling pulses faded. The surface stabilized. But no one who witnessed those weeks of impossible readings could forget what they saw. An object that broke every rule. An object that acted with intention. An object that protected itself. And so, a new silence settled over the scientific world. A silence heavier than wonder, because deep down, everyone knew. If 3 Atlas was a machine, then somewhere there must be a maker. And if it was built to survive the sun, maybe it wasn't running from it. Maybe it was preparing for something else. It began with silence, not the kind that comes from distance or from broken machines, but a silence that felt intentional. Across deep space listening stations around the world, radio telescopes started to pick up something unusual, a faint, narrow-band frequency hovering near the ecliptic plane. At first, it was dismissed as background noise. The cosmos is full of random static. Solar wind, distant pulsars, human interference. But this was different. This wasn't random. This was rhythmic. At NASA's Deep Space Network in California, one technician noticed something strange in the data logs. Tiny gaps, spaced perfectly apart. Not noise, but absence. Each gap lasted a few microseconds. Each one returned like a heartbeat. Not with sound, not with data, but with silence itself. It was as if something out there was sending a message, not through what it said, but through what it refused to say. The discovery spread quickly through the global network of observatories. Australia, Spain, Japan. Every telescope that pointed towards 3I Atlas began to detect the same pattern, the same empty pulse, repeating every 26 minutes without fail. A silence that moved with purpose. You could call it a message made of nothing, but that nothing had structure. Each burst of silence was framed by a faint whisper, a microsecond of interference just before and after, almost like quotation marks, as if something was framing its own absence. Scientists called it the silent transmission. They had never seen anything like it. No modulation, no carrier wave, no recognizable language. Just order, a deliberate pattern, carved out of emptiness. One researcher described it perfectly. It's like listening to a conversation where the words have been erased and only the pauses remain. For days, they tried to decode it. They flipped it, inverted it, compressed it, translated it into binary, then into sound. Every attempt ended the same way. with more silence. But within that silence, the rhythm never changed, never drifted, never broke. Something, or someone, was maintaining it with perfect precision. Meanwhile, 3i Atlas was still cooling itself, drifting farther from the sun. And yet, the radio pulses continued. Not from the object itself, but from around it. Triangulation showed the signal's origin wasn't exactly where 3i Atlas was. It came from a point slightly behind it, roughly where the companion shadow had been detected weeks before. That realization hit like thunder. The source of the silence was the shadow. At the SETI Institute, a small team decided to analyze the intervals between each transmission. They found that the microsecond timing wasn't random. It matched the prime number sequence: 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. The building blocks of mathematics, the language of intelligence. It was as if the silence itself was counting. But counting toward what? In one conference call between research teams, an astrophysicist from Japan asked the question that silenced everyone else. What if the silence isn't the message? What if the silence is the reply? That idea changed everything, because if this transmission was a reply, then someone, somewhere, had spoken first. Hidden deep in the archives, SETI scientists found something remarkable. 21 years ago, in 2004, a test transmission had been sent from Earth. A narrow band burst toward a nearby star system used to calibrate antennas. It wasn't meant as communication, just noise. But now, the pattern of the silent transmission perfectly mirrored that old calibration sequence. Same frequency range, same spacing, same gaps. Except now, the signal had come back, emptied of everything but rhythm. Like an echo that had traveled for decades through the dark and returned without a voice. The scientists didn't know what to make of it. Was this cosmic coincidence? Or was it something responding to us? If it was a response, then it wasn't random at all. It meant someone or something had heard us. And now, it was speaking back. But here's where it became even stranger. The longer they studied the transmission, the more they realized that the silence wasn't constant. Within the gaps buried deep, there were minute fluctuations, microscopic distortions, too precise for nature. When amplified, those distortions revealed a waveform, one that matched the oscillation of 3i Atlas's cooling pattern. The object's heat rhythm and the radio silence were linked. That meant one terrifying thing. The signal wasn't just being sent. It was being generated by the same process keeping 3i Atlas cold. In other words, the silence was energy. One physicist compared it to a negative transmission, a way of speaking by removing sound, a form of energy communication that used absence instead of presence. Not something meant for us, something meant for itself, or for something else listening nearby. Within days, radio observatories began detecting faint echoes of the signal, not from the same location, but from multiple points in the solar system. Tiny, delayed replicas of the original transmission, bouncing like ripples in a dark ocean. As if the signal had woken something up. The deeper they listened, the stranger it became. The intervals between pulses grew shorter, the gaps narrower, the silence itself tightening. Until one day, for a brief, fleeting moment, the silence stopped, and in its place, a single, sharp tone appeared. Just one, pure, clean, lasting exactly 1 second. Then Nothing. When analysts examined it, they found that the tone matched a precise frequency, 1420 megahertz. The hydrogen line, the universal constant. The one frequency every civilization in the universe would recognize. That tone was unmistakably artificial. But what chilled scientists the most wasn't the sound, it was what came after. Because after that 1 second tone, the silence returned. Stronger, deeper, as if something had completed a transmission and was now waiting for a reply. Days passed, then weeks, no more tones, no more signals, just the pulse of emptiness holding steady. And so the researchers did something bold. They replied. A small team at the Deep Space Network sent a narrow-band reply, a mirrored sequence of the same silence. Their goal was simple, to see if it would react. For 72 hours, nothing happened. Then, on the 4th day, the silence broke, but not with sound, with a void. Every frequency within that range went dark, as if something had absorbed the entire band of space itself. No static, no echo, nothing. Just total, deliberate quiet. And that's when one final question began to haunt every mind in that control room. What if we weren't the ones being contacted? What if we were the ones interrupting something else? Because maybe the silence wasn't meant for us at all. Maybe we had stumbled into a conversation far older, far colder, between things that use light, heat, and emptiness as language. And for the first time in human history, we had listened in. But first it was just light, cold, distant sunlight, reflecting off the surface of a passing rock, nothing more. But over time, that light began to change. It no longer scattered the way it should, no longer obeyed the randomness of nature. Instead, it started to organize itself into patterns, perfect geometric patterns. Weeks had passed since the silence, since the strange transmission that seemed to speak in absence. 3i Atlas was moving away from the sun now, drifting through the dim blue light beyond Mars. But something about its surface had shifted. It wasn't just reflecting sunlight anymore. It was shaping it. Astronomers first noticed it in Chile. They were analyzing the object's rotation when they saw something impossible. Flashes of light repeating in perfect intervals. Every 7 hours, a brief but brilliant flicker. Then darkness. Then another, just as precise. At first, they thought it was the telescope. A calibration error, maybe. But when observatories in Japan, France, and Hawaii all recorded the same thing, the truth became undeniable. 3i Atlas was flashing, on purpose. The flashes weren't random. They followed a sequence, clean, deliberate, mathematical. Triangles, spirals, ratios that matched the golden section, a pattern seen in galaxies, hurricanes, and seashells. Except here, it wasn't nature forming beauty. It was something using it. Scientists called the event the reflectivity shift, and it was unlike anything ever recorded. The intensity of the light pulses matched no natural curve, no scattering from dust or ice. Every burst carried precision, like the flicker of a code being written across the face of space. One researcher described it perfectly. It's like it's signaling in geometry. Soon, every major observatory turned its gaze toward 3i Atlas. As the object rotated, the light arranged itself into what looked like patterns of triangular symmetry, angles so exact they matched the proportions of man-made mirrors. To the human eye, it was mesmerizing, a faint, rhythmic shimmer in the dark, like a star pulsing to a silent song. But to the machines watching, it was data, and that data had order. When the patterns were translated into binary sequences, the results left everyone speechless. The intervals formed ratios matching pi, phi, and e, three mathematical constants that appear everywhere in the universe and in human design. No natural body has ever reflected light in that way. This wasn't chaos. This was communication. Through light itself. Theorists began to debate what it meant. Was 3i Atlas trying to speak? Or was it reacting to something? To us, to sunlight, to the silent transmission that had echoed weeks before. Some believed it was an ancient beacon, an autonomous relic drifting through the void, still running an endless loop of signals no one was meant to see. Others thought it was something alive, a self-repairing, self-learning probe, adapting to its new environment. But deep down, there was a quieter, more haunting theory, one that no one wanted to say aloud. What if the reflectivity shift wasn't communication at all? What if it was observation? In the early hours of July 9th, a research team in Switzerland ran a polarization scan on the flashes. What they discovered defied explanation. The reflected light wasn't just bouncing back randomly. It was bending, filtered through an invisible lattice surrounding the object. And hidden inside that light, they detected faint modulations, micro-variations that aligned perfectly with the silent transmission's radio intervals. Light and silence, working together. Two sides of the same signal. When they mapped the reflected sequences in 3D, the flashes formed spirals. Each spiral rotated around an invisible axis, a perfect Fibonacci curve. But here's the chilling part. Each curve wasn't flat. It had depth, as if the light were being sculpted in 3 dimensions. To the scientists, it looked like a blueprint, a holographic shape unfolding in mid-space. At that moment, it became clear. 3i Atlas wasn't just reflecting sunlight. It was using it, like a lens focusing a message, like a mirror turning photons into code. One astrophysicist from the European Southern Observatory described it best. It's not a rock, it's a transmitter made of light. The following week, new data from the James Webb Telescope revealed something even stranger. As the reflectivity shift continued, the companion shadow, the object trailing behind it, began to flicker in sync. Whatever these flashes were, they were being answered. 2 sources of light, 1 signal, a conversation written in geometry. The brightness peaks aligned with astonishing precision. Every triangular flash from 3i Atlas was mirrored by a spiral pulse from the companion. Together, they formed a continuous sequence, like call and response, message and echo. By now, scientists knew this couldn't be coincidence. It was coordination. Across millions of kilometers, 2 objects were communicating through structured light, a technology far beyond anything we understand. And then, just as quickly as it began, the reflectivity shift stopped. Completely. No more flashes, no more spirals, no more golden ratios, only the faint, cold reflection of sunlight off a silent, unremarkable rock. It was as if the objects had said what they needed to say, and then went dark. The final recorded sequence, the last flash, was analyzed frame by frame. It wasn't triangular, it wasn't a spiral, it was a circle. A perfect, unbroken circle. When decoded into binary and run through mathematical translation software, it produced one simple constant, 1.618. the golden ratio itself. A symbol of balance, of design, of completion. And that was the moment when many scientists stopped asking what it was doing and started asking who designed it. Because the reflectivity shift was not an accident. It was deliberate, elegant, almost artistic. Like something intelligent was showing us how it thinks. But if that's true, then there's another question we're not ready to ask. If it wanted us to see these patterns, then what happens when we understand them? The reflectivity shift left behind a trail of impossible data, numbers, ratios, and coordinates that pointed toward nothing we recognize. Or maybe not nothing. Maybe a destination, somewhere beyond the reach of our telescopes, somewhere waiting for whatever 3i Atlas really is to finally return home. At 3:17 a.m. UTC, every telescope watching 3i Atlas saw the same thing. Nothing. The object that had been tracked for months, the one sending signals, reflecting patterns and defying physics, simply vanished. No light, no heat, no trace, just empty coordinates where something extraordinary had once been. It happened at perihelion, the moment of closest approach to the sun. The point where the object should have been burning brighter than ever was instead the moment it went completely dark. For 6 hours, it ceased to exist. At first, scientists assumed it was interference. Solar radiation often scrambles sensors when objects get too close to the sun's glare. But when every observatory across 6 continents reported the same blackout, the explanation no longer made sense. Because this wasn't interference. This was absence. For months, 3i Atlas had behaved like a machine, cooling itself, controlling light, communicating in geometry. But now, in the most intense heat imaginable, it disappeared. And in that disappearance, in that silence, there was something deliberate, almost defensive. The moment it went dark, every radio telescope also flatlined. No signals, no pulses, not even background noise. The silent transmission, the mysterious radio silence that had been pulsing for weeks, ended. It didn't fade. It stopped. Like someone had flipped a switch. 6 hours. That's how long the void lasted. 6 hours of pure nothing. Astronomers stared at blank screens, their data streams collapsing into static. Then, as suddenly as it vanished, 3i Atlas came back. The first sighting was from the Soho Solar Observatory. A faint, glowing object appeared just beyond the sun's limb. Not vaporized, not fragmented, but perfectly intact. It shimmered for a moment, as if made of liquid metal, then dimmed again, returning to its familiar dull grey. To the untrained eye, it looked unchanged. But to those watching closely, something was different. Its trajectory. Every model predicted the same orbit before perihelion. 3i Atlas should have continued along a fixed interstellar path, slinging past the sun, then vanishing into the void forever. But after the blackout, the data no longer matched. Its course had shifted, not by much, less than 1 degree, but enough to change its entire journey. And that shift was impossible, because no natural force could explain it. Solar gravity pulls in straight lines. Comets don't make corrections. Rocks don't steer themselves. But 3i Atlas did. It altered its orbit, like something or someone had given an order. In Houston, a NASA orbital dynamics analyst ran the numbers again and again. No matter how many times she calculated, the conclusion was the same. The object had applied a force, a controlled burn. Not random thrust, not debris impact, a maneuver. And it was precise. The realization hit like a cold wave. For months, we thought we were studying a visitor from another system. But what if 3I Atlas wasn't traveling alone? What if it was being guided? Some scientists theorized that the perihelion event wasn't a disappearance at all, but a transformation. That, at the moment of peak radiation, 3I Atlas entered some kind of phase shift, a process that temporarily changed its physical state to survive the sun's heat. They compared it to metamorphosis, a caterpillar entering the cocoon. But this wasn't nature. This was engineering. The 6-hour blackout matched the exact duration of the object's rotational period before it vanished, which meant one thing: whatever happened, it happened in rhythm, like a timed operation, a programmed event. When 3I Atlas reappeared, infrared scans showed faint energy residue, a thermal afterglow, not from solar heating, but from within. It was radiating, not randomly, but in a slow, pulsing wave. The signature matched no known element. It wasn't radiation. It wasn't plasma. It was something else. Something contained. The European Space Agency released a brief statement hours later. The object experienced a non-gravitational acceleration consistent with internal propulsion. Internal propulsion. Those two words sent shockwaves through the global astronomy community. Because comets don't have engines, asteroids don't make decisions, but 3I Atlas just had. Still, what truly haunted the scientists wasn't the motion, it was the precision. The new trajectory placed 3I Atlas on a course that bypassed Jupiter's orbit. Not at random, but aligning almost perfectly with Earth's ecliptic plane. It wasn't coming toward us, but it was parallel, traveling beside our world. Watching, perhaps, or waiting. In those 6 missing hours, something had changed inside that object. Its rotation slowed by 0.2%. Its albedo, the measure of surface reflectivity, dropped sharply. The once brilliant flashes of geometric light were gone. It was quieter now, darker, almost as if it had completed whatever it came to do. One researcher described it best. It looks like it's gone to sleep. But if that were true, what was it dreaming of? A few independent astronomers proposed something even bolder, that the blackout wasn't an accident, and it wasn't just self-preservation. It was communication, not to us, but to something else. Something hidden within the sun's blinding light. For centuries, the sun has been our source of life. But it's also the perfect hiding place. Its radiation blinds our instruments. Its flares drown out all signals. If something wanted to move unseen, if something wanted to meet undetected, that would be the place to do it. So maybe 3I Atlas didn't disappear. Maybe it docked. Maybe, for 6 hours, it wasn't alone. No one can prove what happened during those missing hours. No camera caught it. No telescope saw it. All we have is the aftermath. A trajectory shift, a heat signature that shouldn't exist, and a silence that feels deliberate. But one detail continues to haunt the researchers. When the object reappeared, it sent out a brief, narrowband pulse. Only once, just a fraction of a second long. When decoded, it wasn't data. It wasn't sound. It was a shape, a simple circle. The same pattern that ended the reflectivity shift, a closed loop, a symbol of completion. And maybe that's what it was. Completion. The end of one phase and the beginning of something else. As 3I Atlas drifts farther from the sun now, its new path takes it deeper into the outer system. Quiet, stable, and precise. No more signals, no more flashes, just a machine moving with purpose. Its course correction complete. But one question remains, the one that echoes through every observatory, every lab, every sleepless researcher staring into the dark. If this was a maneuver, then who gave the order? Sometimes the universe speaks softly, not in sound, but in reflection. And this time, what it said was us. Weeks after the perihelion event, when 3I Atlas vanished and returned with a new trajectory, something strange began to echo across the deep sky. At first it was faint, a ripple of light modulation picked up by telescopes tuned to watch the object's silent path. But within that flicker, there was something eerily familiar, a rhythm, a code, a memory. At SETI headquarters, analysts began decoding the signal, line by line, bit by bit. And what they found made their hearts stop. The light patterns coming from 3I Atlas weren't random. They mirrored binary fragments, sequences identical to ancient radio transmissions once sent from Earth, messages we had broadcast into the cosmos decades ago, signals meant to introduce humanity to whoever or whatever might be listening. Now they were coming back. But not as radio waves, as light. The realization was almost poetic. Something out there had caught our voice and was sending it back through the stars. But it wasn't a perfect copy. The binary patterns were incomplete, fragmented. Some lines reversed, others rewritten, as though filtered through a machine trying to understand emotion. Like a mirror trying to imitate a face, but not quite knowing what a face truly is. SETI researchers compared the patterns to known broadcasts. The first match came from 1974, the Arecibo message, a coded signal sent toward the M13 star cluster, carrying information about our DNA, our planet, and our place in the universe. The same sequence, the same mathematical signature, was now appearing in the light pulses from 3I Atlas, but distorted. Instead of binary 1S and 0S, the signal used fluctuating intensity, bright for 1, dim for 0, and the spacing between pulses matched not our radio timing, but our heartbeat, 60 to 70 beats per minute. It wasn't just replaying our message, it was translating it into rhythm, into something living. One analyst whispered what everyone else was thinking. It's not repeating us, it's responding. The deeper they looked, the stranger it became. Fragments of the Voyager golden record. That golden disk we launched into space in 1977 appeared in the light modulation as well. Frequencies that matched the opening audio of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, followed by gaps exactly equal to the pauses in Carl Sagan's spoken greeting. The modulation wasn't random data. It was mimicking the sound of our history, our art, our language, our longing. But every time the pattern repeated, it changed slightly, as if learning, refining, becoming something new. In the control room, the atmosphere grew heavy. What kind of intelligence would take our oldest messages and send them back in the language of light? Was it trying to talk to us? Or trying to show us that it had been listening all along? NASA's Deep Space Network began to record the entire transmission. Over 8 days, the modulation repeated 12 times, each cycle slightly clearer than the last. When analyzed, Every sequence ended the same way, a blanked interval exactly 19 hours long. The same pulse cycle from Chapter 2, the heartbeat that had haunted every observation since this began. It was all connected. The working theory was as elegant as it was unsettling. 3. Atlas wasn't just reflecting light. It was using it as a memory device, storing fragments of electromagnetic signals that once left Earth decades ago. Somehow, it had found those transmissions out in interstellar space, absorbed them, and was now playing them back to the planet that sent them. A mirror made of distance and time. But the more they decoded, the less human the message began to sound. The binary patterns started to mutate. Instead of structured sequences, the data began folding in on itself. Like the reflection had learned our voice and was now trying to speak it differently. The intervals between flashes grew shorter, the rhythm more organic. At times, the light even pulsed like a breathing pattern. Slow, then fast, then slow again, as if whatever was behind it was alive. SETI analysts ran a simulation to see what would happen if the modulations were converted into sound. When they played the translation through speakers, what filled the room wasn't static, it was music. A faint, wavering hum, like whale song wrapped in digital noise. The pitch rose and fell with uncanny precision. There was rhythm. There was structure. And in the silence between notes, you could almost feel intent. It wasn't beautiful. It wasn't alien. It was familiar, almost human. For the first time, scientists realized the terrifying possibility. 3i Atlas wasn't mimicking us by chance. It had heard us. Our signals, our messages, our songs, our greetings had crossed the emptiness of space, and something had found them. Now it was holding up a mirror, showing us how we sounded through its perception. An imitation of our voice, a reflection of our past. But one question burned in every mind. If it had found our messages, where? Those radio waves had traveled outward for decades, faint, dying, scattered. By now, they should be hundreds of light years away. 3i Atlas couldn't have intercepted them naturally, not in its brief time within our solar system, unless it had already been out there when those messages first passed through, unless it had followed them back. That single idea changed everything. Maybe 3i Atlas didn't wander here by chance. Maybe it came home, drawn by the sound of our voice. Our signal, our greeting to the stars, might have been the beacon that called it in. And now it was answering. In its final days of observation, the object's light began to dim again. The pulses slowed. The reflections grew quieter, like a recording fading into static. The last readable modulation came on August 14th. When translated, it contained a single binary phrase, a perfect symmetrical palindrome, one that could be read forward or backward. We see you. And then the light was gone. 3i Atlas continued on its new trajectory, drifting silently toward the edge of our solar system. But its echo remained, a ghostly trace of our own voice carried on the edge of fading light. A whisper from the deep sky, reminding us that in trying to speak to the universe, we may have finally been heard. Space is supposed to be empty, silent, cold. But near 3i Atlas, something was moving, something structured, something that shouldn't exist. It began with a small anomaly, a faint thermal echo detected beside the object. At first, it seemed harmless, a patch of slightly warmer space lingering just off the comet's surface. But when scientists adjusted the filters, what emerged from the darkness wasn't a glitch. It was a structure. The data showed a shape, faint but precise. A metallic lattice rotating with mechanical perfection, not spinning freely, not tumbling like rock, but turning slowly, methodically, like a machine built with purpose. The readings were subtle. The structure absorbed sunlight, then released bursts of controlled heat, not enough to shine, but just enough to maintain stability. It was regulating itself, balancing in the void, alive, in its own way. NASA's infrared analysts couldn't believe what they were seeing. When they mapped the thermal fluctuations over time, the pattern formed symmetrical rings, evenly spaced, perfectly timed, as if generated by a system designed to manage energy flow. No comet, no asteroid, no natural body had ever behaved like this. This wasn't chaos. This was engineering. Within days, the phenomenon was confirmed by the European Space Observatory. The readings were identical. But the strangest discovery came next. When scientists tried to calculate the relative mass of the structure, the numbers didn't add up. If it was as large as it appeared, it should have been pulling on 3I Atlas, altering its orbit. But it wasn't. It was massless. Or close enough to make no gravitational difference, like a shell of hollow geometry, a frame, a machine skeleton. When the heat data was converted into visual spectrum, something terrifying became clear. This structure wasn't new. It had been there for a long, long time. Long before 3I Atlas entered our solar system. Long before our telescopes ever found it. The carbon mapping showed erosion patterns, layers of micrometeorite damage, cosmic dust embedded deep within the surface. It had been drifting for centuries, maybe millennia. Whatever this machine was, it didn't belong to 3I Atlas. The comet was following it. Scientists began calling it the scaffold, a lattice of intersecting beams, rotating in perfect unison with 3I Atlas's path. Every few hours, it released tiny jets of infrared heat, not random, but coordinated, as though responding to something unseen, almost like it was guiding the object, or protecting it. Across the world, research teams started comparing data. The scaffold temperature never rose above 35 Kelvin, so cold it was nearly invisible. But its precision was frightening. Every rotation aligned perfectly with the object's position relative to the sun. Every thermal burst matched the same 19-hour cycle that had haunted every chapter of this mystery. The same rhythm, the same pulse. One astrophysicist described it best. It behaves like an orbiting exoskeleton, a machine that has no master, but a mission. Then came the shock, when the signals from the silent transmission were overlaid with the scaffold's heat pulses. The two matched exactly. The machine wasn't just emitting heat, it was broadcasting silence. It was the source of the signal, the architect behind the emptiness. And that silence wasn't random either. It was filled with tiny distortions, almost like breaths, the kind of thermal whisper a machine might make when it's thinking. But the deeper scientists looked, the stranger it got. The lattice didn't behave like metal. When radar pings hit it, the reflections came back fractured. Some bounced instantly. Others took milliseconds longer, as if the signal had been trapped inside and redirected through a maze of internal corridors. It was as if the machine was folding space within itself, a geometry that shouldn't exist. Mathematicians studying the pattern of those radar echoes discovered something chilling. Every angle of the lattice aligned to the golden ratio, 1.618, the same as what may be the clearest image of the scaffold's At one moment, its structure was rigid, defined, sharp. But seconds later, it blurred. Not faded. Blurred, as if part of it slipped out of visible reality. When analyzed frame by frame, the lattice appeared to shift phase, changing the way light interacted with it. The conclusion? It was built to move between energy states, a machine that could hide, not by turning off, but by existing in more than one form at once. That realization sent shockwaves through the scientific world, because if something could phase out of visibility, if it could bend energy and absorb heat with intention, then it wasn't just ancient. It was advanced, far beyond us. By now, even skeptics were silent. This was no longer theory. This was evidence. Something artificial was out there, ancient, deliberate, and synchronized with a body from another star. The final breakthrough came when analysts reran historical scans of the sky. They found traces of the same thermal signature, faint and nearly forgotten, appearing in archived data from 2017, the same year Oumuamua passed through our solar system. The same pattern, the same heat rhythm. That meant one thing. The scaffold wasn't unique. It was part of a network, a chain of identical machines moving through interstellar space, each one drifting silently, each one leaving faint trails of coded light and engineered cold. Not probes, not ships, but something in between. Maybe beacons, maybe guardians, maybe messengers. And as 3I Atlas drifted further away from the sun, the scaffold rotated one last time. Then its heat signature began to fade, slowly dissolving into darkness. Not destroyed, not gone, just invisible again, waiting. Before it disappeared, it released one final thermal burst, short, symmetrical, and perfectly timed. When decoded, the numbers aligned with a celestial coordinate far from our system, a direction, a destination, the same region of space where our earliest radio signals were sent decades ago. It was as if the machine had finished its task and was pointing home. The scientists never found out what it was made of or who created it, but one truth became impossible to ignore. 3I Atlas was never the message. It was the messenger, and the thing following it, the cold, metallic lattice moving in silence, wasn't broken. It wasn't lost. It was working, still performing the same function it was built for, long before humanity ever looked up at the sky. So the question remains, not what it is, but why it's still here. Because maybe the scaffold wasn't built to travel. Maybe it was built to wait. And maybe, somewhere in the black distance, beyond our understanding, something else is waiting for its signal to return. In the quiet of space, there are no coincidences, only patterns. And sometimes, those patterns whisper of something greater. When astronomers traced the incoming path of 3I Atlas, they expected it to lead back into the endless dark, a straight line through the void where random chance had thrown it toward us. But what they found was something impossible. The path didn't lead into chaos. It crossed a memory, the same point in space where another visitor had once passed. Oumuamua. Back in 2017, the world watched as that strange, cigar-shaped object slipped through our solar system. It was the first confirmed interstellar visitor. an enigma that refused every explanation. Too fast to be a comet, too thin to be an asteroid, and yet too deliberate to be a fragment of rock. Then it was gone, silent, untraceable, leaving behind only a single question. What was it? Years later, when 3I Atlas appeared, no one expected the two to share anything in common. Different shapes, different paths, different times. But when the data came in, the room went still. The vectors, the precise mathematical lines that describe an object's motion, didn't just align closely, they overlapped almost perfectly. 3I Atlas had followed the same route as Oumuamua, years apart. Same angle, same orientation, same approach towards the sun. The odds of that happening by chance? Less than 1 in a billion. That's not coincidence. That's intention. NASA analysts called it the origin paradox, because according to physics, two interstellar objects traveling from different directions shouldn't share the same path, not across the vast randomness of the galaxy, unless they came from the same place, or were sent by the same hand. When astronomers extended the trajectory backward, the pattern grew even stranger. Both objects seemed to emerge from the same region of interstellar space, an empty void between the stars, roughly in the direction of Lyra, the constellation that once inspired the famous Arecibo message. It wasn't just a direction, it was a connection. In that region, there's nothing visible. No star systems, no planets, no clusters to explain such alignment, only a darkness so deep that even the galaxy's background light seems to bend away from it. Some call it a cosmic gap. Others believe it's a hiding place. As researchers began to layer the paths of both 3I Atlas and Oumuamua on a 3D simulation, they noticed something eerie. At their closest points, the two trajectories don't just cross, they synchronize. For a brief moment, years apart in time but identical in space, both objects occupy the same invisible corridor, a gravitationally stable region shaped like a tunnel through the solar plane. An invisible highway, a path that doesn't occur naturally. What if these weren't random visitors? What if they were part of a network? A sequence of machines, each passing silently through our system, mapping, transmitting, observing, and then leaving, like seeds scattered across galaxies. Or sentinels, checking on something they left behind. The team at the European Space Observatory ran deeper simulations. When they extended both trajectories back thousands of years, a startling pattern emerged. Their origins didn't just point to the same region. They rotated around it, like orbiting fragments bound by an invisible center. But there's nothing there. At least, nothing we can see. It's as if both 3I Atlas and Oumuamua are orbiting an object that isn't visible, a gravitational shadow, hidden deep within interstellar space. Some believe it could be a dark object, a structure made not of matter, but of fields and information, something that doesn't reflect light, something that can't die, because it was never alive. And maybe these interstellar visitors are drawn to it, returning, reporting, like messengers to a silent god. Others took a simpler approach. They asked a more human question. What if this is a route, a designed path, an interstellar corridor connecting star systems through gravitational precision, the kind of route you'd need if you were building a network of autonomous machines, machines that travel between suns, collecting data and returning home? If that's true, then 3I Atlas and Oumuamua weren't anomalies. They were the proof of architecture, a cosmic design hidden in plain sight. But the story doesn't end there, because when scientists looked closer at the light curves of Oumuamua from the 2017, they found something they'd missed before. Small, rhythmic variations in its brightness, barely detectable with the old instruments. When compared to the 19-hour pulse cycle of 3I Atlas, the rhythm matched exactly. The same pulse, the same silence, the same echo, separated by years but singing the same song. That's when fear began to replace curiosity. If both objects share the same design, the same signal, the same path, then maybe they aren't independent at all. Maybe they're connected. And if they're connected, then something, somewhere, is controlling them. SETI's lead analyst described the moment they realized this. It's like looking at two fingerprints and realizing they belong to the same hand. The hand, though, remains unseen. Some theorists began to speculate that this hand isn't bound by time in the way we understand it. That these objects might not be separate probes, but moments, different fragments of the same entity, moving through time as easily as through space. Like echoes of one machine, passing through our solar system at intervals we can't yet comprehend. A cycle spanning centuries. If that's true, then 3I Atlas didn't just follow Oumuamua's path. It completed it. And somewhere out there, another one may already be coming, following the same invisible road, headed for the same destination. Us. When the orbital data was finally visualized on screen, it formed something hauntingly familiar. A spiral, perfectly geometric, balanced, the same pattern that had appeared in the reflectivity shift, the same ratios found in the scaffold's design. Every discovery, every anomaly leading to one undeniable conclusion. None of this was coincidence. It was coordination. The universe isn't random. It's recursive, repeating itself in code and form, like a message hidden in its own reflection. And now we're standing at the center of that pattern, staring at the paradox it reveals. Two travelers, two moments in time, one path. It's no longer about where they came from, but why they're coming here. In the end, pause. It left us with light. 12 flashes, small, cold, and perfect. The last breath of something that had traveled across the stars, only to look back at us one final time. Months had passed since the last confirmed reading of 3I Atlas. The object was drifting steadily toward the edge of our solar system, a faint dot fading into the dark. Telescopes could barely track it anymore. Its signals had stopped. Its thermal readings had gone silent. For all we knew, it was gone, just another interstellar wanderer swallowed by distance. Until one night, a signal appeared. It came without warning. A sharp pulse of light, clean, deliberate, and painfully precise. Every major observatory caught it simultaneously. Chile, Hawaii, Japan. Even small amateur telescopes picked it up. The flash wasn't random. It wasn't a flare or a reflection or an error. It was structured. 12 bursts of light, each separated by exactly 0.33 seconds. Not a single variation. Not one missed beat. It was mathematical perfection. At first, scientists thought it was a farewell signal, a last transmission before the object disappeared forever. But when the data came through, they realized it wasn't just light. It was information. Each flash carried encoded intervals, microsecond delays that formed a repeating pattern. When converted into binary, the sequence became unmistakable. A string of 12 pairs. 12 precise combinations, The pattern matched something we knew all too well: the human genome. The 12 flashes aligned with the 12 base pairs of DNA: adenine, thymine, cytosine, guanine, repeated in symmetrical order. It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't a guess. It was recognition. 3i Atlas had sent us the blueprint of life. Our life. The scientific community froze. How could an interstellar object, one that had never touched Earth, never entered our atmosphere, never even approached within millions of miles, know the sequence of human DNA? In the control room at NASA's Deep Space Network, the monitors flickered with streams of data. At the top of the screen, a small line of code began to repeat with every flash. 12 characters, binary in form, but when translated, through base. For encryption, it spelled something haunting. Origin confirmed. No one spoke. No one moved. It was as if the machine had whispered back, acknowledging not just our existence, but our reflection in its design. The light sequence continued for exactly 73 seconds. Then, nothing. No residual heat, no trailing radiation, no sound. The object didn't explode, or vanish, or fade into noise. It simply stopped. Every telescope pointed to its coordinates saw only emptiness. Black sky, no trace of movement, as if the object had turned itself off, ending a conversation we never realized we were part of. For days, analysts rechecked the readings. They scoured for patterns, for hidden codes buried within the light. And one by one, the same realization sank in. 3i Atlas hadn't sent the signal to us. It had reflected something back. Our own DNA. Our own structure. The final transmission wasn't a message. It was a mirror. That meant one thing. The object had been scanning us. All those months of pulses, signals, and silence. It hadn't been random. It had been watching, collecting, learning. And now, at the edge of our solar system, it had confirmed what it came to find. That life exists here. That it has a pattern, a design, a meaning. One scientist described it best. We thought we were observing a comet, but it was observing us. There was something poetic about it. For decades, humanity has pointed its telescopes outward, searching for signs of life in the void. We sent messages. We broadcast our names. We waited for an answer. And now, when it finally came, it wasn't words, or sound, or language. It was recognition, delivered in the most ancient language of all, the code of life itself. After the last pulse, silence returned to the sky. But deep in that silence, somewhere beyond our reach, 3i Atlas continued to drift. Its path no longer aligned with our sun. It was changing direction, turning slightly, slowly, purposefully, heading not outward, but sideways, into the dark plain between the stars, toward the same region of space where Oumuamua once came from. The same origin, the same paradox. Was it returning home? Or moving on to the next world? No one knows. All we know is that before it vanished, it left behind a message written in the very thing that makes us human. A message not about communication, but connection. It's almost ironic. For centuries we've looked outward, trying to find meaning among the stars. And in the end, the answer came not as a voice, but as a reflection of ourselves. A quiet reminder that maybe we aren't as alone as we thought, and maybe we were never meant to be. Somewhere out there, in the darkness between suns, something is watching, not to invade, not to conquer, but to understand. It came here once, twice, perhaps, maybe more, each time silent, each time leaving only patterns, light, geometry, truth. And now, it's gone. The last observation recorded in the archives reads, "Object no longer visible. Signal terminated." No detectable anomalies remain. But in that silence, in that emptiness, there's still something that lingers, a question we may never be ready to answer. What if we weren't the first ones it found? What if we're not the only ones it scanned? What if this entire encounter wasn't discovery at all, but documentation, a record, a catalogue of creation? And maybe, somewhere across the stars, someone or something is keeping that record, filing away the blueprint of every world that ever dared to look back. 3i Atlas didn't come to say hello. It came to remember, to observe, to confirm, and in its quiet departure, it left us with a truth more haunting than any sound. We are not just observers of the universe. We are part of its memory.